dab of information and a whole lot of laughs. And to help me carry this show off today is Mr. Bill Russell. Bill, thank you, my friend, for putting this together. This event would not happen without you making it happen, buddy. Thank you so very much.
Joe, I'm the happiest man in Lake Norman. You know why I'm the happiest man in Lake Norman?
I'm afraid to ask.
Because phase one is back. We're going to have some business in the lake, baby.
And that's what we hope for the next 3 nights from 7 to 9. We hope that what we're going to do is inspire, motivate, and entertain all of you listeners out there. We are also Facebook Live, so please go to WSIC Facebook Live, and if you got a question, we'll try and work it into our conversation. We also have a very dear friend of mine, whether he wants to admit it or not, by live Zoom, Chuck Gallagher. Chuck, are you there, my friend?
I am, and it is great to be with you. Hey, Joe and Bill.
Chuck, thank you so much for doing this, buddy. We've got a special introduction from Senator Thom Tillis. Once we do that, I want to introduce everybody to you and what you're going to talk about, my friend, and then we'll get started on this phenomenal program that we have put together. Let me tell everybody to begin with, this would not be possible without the phenomenal keynote speakers that Chuck Gallagher has put together. So, Chuck, thank you in advance, buddy, for making this happen. There's no way this could happen without you, my friend. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Let's hear a short note from Mr. Thom Tillis.
Good evening. Tonight is the first of 3 outstanding events created by WSIC and the Lake Norman Chamber. A little inspiration, touch of motivation, and a lot of laughs. Special thanks to Joe, the host of Local Biz Now.
No audio?
This is the 7th year the Lake Norman Chamber has hosted an event like this, which honors our small businesses.
While we're trying to get that audio,
small business is the absolute foundation
while we're
of
trying
our
to get the audio to
economy.
work, let's bring Chuck
and here
back
in North
in.
Carolina,
Chuck, you and I met
about
3 years ago, and we've got the Tillis video working again. So let's start this video back up again.
Tonight is the first of 3 outstanding events created by WSIC and the Lake Norman Chamber. A little inspiration, touch of motivation, and a lot of laughs. Special thanks to Joe, the host of Local Biz Now. This is the 7th year the Lake Norman Chamber has hosted an event like this, which honors our small businesses. Small business is the absolute foundation of our national economy, and here in North Carolina, there are over 200,000 small businesses. Prior to the pandemic, there were over 28,500 small businesses in Mecklenburg County and over 69,000 sole proprietors. I have worked hard on behalf of North Carolinians, and I'm proud we were able to pass the CARES Act to create the Paycheck Protection Program and to protect as many of these businesses as possible. Chuck Gallagher is the keynote this evening, who will touch on his personal experiences as well as share ways that you can stand out from the competition and create the distinction advantage. I hope you have a great event.
Tillis, the senator has been involved. Every time we picked up the phone call and asked Bill and asked him to do something, Senator Tillis has been right there to help us. This is just a small example. Any glitches that you see in our video is our fault, not his fault. So
you said it was going to be my fault. You always said it was my fault.
I'm sorry, Bill's fault. It's all Bill's fault. But Bill, thank you for hooking the senator up with us. Thank you for letting this program happen. This happens because Bill Russell and Lake Norman Chamber has been partnering with WSIC and myself for 7 years now, Bill.
7 years. We've been doing this for 7 years.
And so about 2-3 years ago, we got Chuck Gallagher involved, and he came out in an orange jumpsuit with handcuffs. And the minute that happened, I looked over at Julie, my client manager, and I said, he's my favorite convict. I just love this. And it's been a phenomenal show that he put on. So we went first to Chuck to make this happen, and Chuck has put this on. Chuck, my friend, thank you so much for allowing us to have this happen, because all of our live speakers are going to be performing out of your studio, correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And in the age that we're in, one thing we've got to do is embrace change. And so, I remember so fondly being a part of the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce small business meeting. It was such a blast. And to know that you couldn't have the live event this year was kind of painful, but yet think about it, with the connections that you have with WSIC and with Facebook Live or Zoom and the multitudes of ways we can get out to people, I'm going to bet over the next 3 nights you'll reach more people than you did when you had the live event. And I think that's actually impressive.
Yeah, you might be right. We'll find out. Don't worry about it, Chuck. If something goes wrong, that's why I got Bill here. We're going to blame it on Bill.
Yeah, I like that. Blame it on Bill night. Okay, I'll remember that and pass that along to Kathy and Steve on Tuesday and Wednesday. How's that?
So I want everybody listening to know what we intend on doing, right? We intend on having a keynote speaker that I just absolutely adore. Bill and I have heard before. We like them. We believe in them. Now, in your case, Chuck, it was by accident, you know, because everybody knows you're my favorite convict, right? But
right.
Our third night to close out this 3-day event is a dear friend of yours who every time I talk to you, you keep committing him to do something for you. So when it's Steve's turn, I'm going to blame you for again putting him into something, committing him to something. You've got one heck of a friend, and he is one heck of an honorable guy, because every time I talk to him, I say, Chuck said you were going to do this. And he said, well, if Chuck said it, I'm going to do it.
See, I like having friends like that because, you know, it just does make it comfortable to know that you can commit someone to doing something and they will. But you know, and I know too, that Steve is phenomenal in what he does. And so to have an opportunity to give into the geographic area that he lives in is something that he always looks forward to. So trust me when I say he was thrilled that I gave him a call and said, hey, could you be a part of this? As was Kathy, who'll be presenting tomorrow night because she lives here in the Greenville area. And with social distancing and the problems we have with travel and so forth, there is nobody that I would rather connect with than Kathy. She's got a great message. And we've had the opportunity to work together. So I know tomorrow's going to be outstanding as well.
Well, Chuck, we are just so looking forward to this. You know, you and I called you and just wanted to get some ideas on how to put this show together. And you literally laid it out for me in my mind's eye. And in less than 3 days, we had this event planned and we were putting this thing together, buddy. So I am so excited to be able to actually have it happen here today. Right, here we go. We're ready to roll on this thing. Bill, you've been a part of Lake Norman Chamber for about 20 years. This is the first time you've done something like this, correct?
20 years, actually a little bit longer than that, since 1996. But yeah, this is a fantastic event, and with all the challenges that has faced these business owners over the last 7 or 8 weeks, to be able to bring these caliber of speakers together, and Chuck was just talking about it. We couldn't do this without this COVID-19 pandemic, because we're putting some people together that's really going to reach out. They're going to inspire. They're going to motivate. We're going to laugh. But there's some lessons to be learned here in the next 3 nights.
Chuck, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break, let you get set up and comfortable, drink a little bit of water so we can get started. And when we come back, buddy, we're going to let you do what you do best, my friend.
Sounds great. I look forward to it. I'm ready when you are.
Thanks, buddy. You are listening to WSIC. This is a special edition of Local Biz Now. We're going to inspire, motivate, inform, and have you laugh. You are listening to WSIC. If it's WSIC, your business matters. Sit back, get yourself a cup of coffee, get a Pepsi. We'll be back in just a minute to start our program.
Guys, don't let the black slide fool you. It's intentional.
That's JSCMgroup.com.
Tune into WSIC.
You are listening to WSIC. I am Joe Vagnone, and I am here with Bill Russell. This is a 3-day small business event, and we are starting it off with my friend, whether he wants to admit it or not, speaking about the distinction advantages, how to effectively use video and grow your business. My buddy, Mr. Chuck Gallagher. Chuck, take it away, my friend.
Joe, thank you very much. And look, as we start tonight, some of the folks that were at the presentation years ago will remember this. I typically start out a program saying every choice has a consequence. You see, on October 2nd, 1995, I took 23 physical steps. And as I took those steps, I thought about my wife. I thought about my 2 children, Rob and Alex. Oh, I don't know. They were just little tykes at the time. I thought about my career. Now, at the time, I was Chuck Gallagher. I was tax partner in a CPA firm. I testified before Congress on various aspects of federal tax law, written articles in national magazines, taught continuing education courses in 30 states. I was in Morganton, North Carolina, while I was a somebody. I thought about the church where I had been music director for 12 years. I literally, Joe, thought about everything that defined my life. But on that day, as I took those steps, on the 24th step, I reached out my hands, I pushed opened the door, and on that day, I stepped into federal prison. On that day, I became 11-642-058, an inmate, what most people would define as a nobody. You see, every choice we make in life, well, it has a consequence. Now, Joe, you were kind enough to say I'm your favorite convict. That is not exactly something I am particularly proud of. However, some folks who are listening to this might say, well, goodness gracious, if we're talking about the distinction advantage, why would you talk about something like that? And then, if I remember correctly, one of the things that you said was that on that day, back at the small business meeting with the Lake Norman Chamber, I walked in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. And I want to tell you a little backstory behind that because it really illustrates part of the reason we're here tonight. Several years ago, I was in a mastermind group. By the way, I really recommend small business people consider the possibility of connecting with other small business people so we can put our heads together because we're pretty sharp folks. It was like Tom Tillis was talking about all of the small businesses in North and South Carolina and the sole proprietorships and the entrepreneurs. So we're a sharp group of people. But sometimes the best ideas come from other folks. So I'm sitting here with this mastermind group. And there was a lady that was kind of facilitating that. And she said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. As a speaker, she said, I hate to say this, but unless you are Tony Robbins or Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy or a celebrity, the reality is a year from now, if you speak at an event, nobody's going to remember your name. And I have to say, that kind of hurt my heart because I was like, really? And then she said, you've got to do something that will cause the audience to remember you. And she challenged us to do that. And so here we are. And I don't know, I guess I looked like I had a deer in the headlights. It was like, so like, I don't understand. What do you mean by that? And she said, well, yours is easy. I said, really? She said, yeah. She looked at me and she said, here's what you need to do. You need to walk into the room in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. Be quiet. And she said, tell your story. And she said, in 30 seconds to a minute, you'll own the audience. And I said, I can't do that. She said, why not? I said, well, that's just crazy. It's just out there. And her response was, well, everybody bombs once. So if you bomb, call it the one time that you're going to bomb. But I promise you, people will remember. Now, with that said, I want to ask you a question. And that question is, What is your differentiator? How do you structure your business in an age of disruption? You see, because here's the thing, and I might mention this a time or two as we walk through this, but look, we're sitting here, it's May, it's 2020. If we went back 6 months, it was November of 2019, what would we have said about 2020? Oh my goodness, we have the lowest unemployment in this country in 50 years. This is crazy. And the stock market was on a tear. It just kept going up and up and up. I mean, it looked wonderful. And we were moving into an election season. And everybody knows that election year, nothing drastic happens. I mean, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, don't care about the politics, but if it's an election year, you want everything to be just smooth sailing because, well, most politicians want to be reelected. And then, I guess it was, let me think about this. This picture that I'm showing for those of you watching this on Facebook Live, this is the Charlotte Douglas International Airport on the very last trip that I had, which was the last speaking engagement that literally existed in 2020 for me, and that was in early March. You'll notice few people in the airport. And you'll also notice that if you were there today, it is a ghost airport. I mean, who would have thought at this point in time that Marriott would report, room rates down 90%? Who would have thunk? I guess that's not really a right word, but who would have really thought that American Airlines, Delta, United, and Southwest all would be literally parking their airplanes at airports on runways that aren't being used because there's just not enough air traffic taking place? Who would have thought about those kinds of disruptions? And for most small businesses, the thing that we face today is we're sitting here in an age of disruption. I don't think anybody 6 months ago, just 6 months ago, would have anticipated we'd be here today. And I'm quite confident, Bill, that as you all were thinking about what was going to happen for Small Business Week and the program you were going to put in, you did not anticipate that we were going to be doing this and using the age of technology to be able to make it happen. So I want to pose a question to the small business owners and the folks that are listening, either radio or watching this on Facebook Live, and that is, how are you connecting with your customers? You see, if you think about it, right now we are in an age of disruption, right? Everything is happening. Literally, we have organizations. I'm a vice president in a public company. I'll talk about that in a moment, but I'm a VP in a public company. We closed our offices literally here and in Rainbow City, Alabama, where our second offices are headquartered, with our home office in Salt Lake City, and everybody dispersed to their homes. We literally began doing our work from home. Now, let me just share a side story with that. This is the weird part about the world that we live in today. So here's the side story. We had just leased a new office space off of Pelham Road. That's in Greenville, South Carolina. Our Rainbow City office just literally renovated a brand new space. I mean, it is beautiful. They were so proud of the new office. They were in literally a week and a half before we got, work from home orders, and we all dispersed. Here's what happened. Productivity went up. Now, I want you to think about this for a second, because if you're the president of the public company that I'm a VP of, and you just sat there and signed a lease for 5 years at $100,000 a year for one building, and I don't know exactly what the lease is on the other, but obviously we're spending a fair amount of money on lease space. And we sent all our employees home and said, listen, get up in the morning. Don't care if you're in your PJs, makes no difference to us. It'd be nice if you silenced the dog and maybe the kids weren't crying. And we know that this is disruptive for everybody. But you know what? Our business has increased. Our productivity has increased. And it is now causing us to rethink, how do we do business in 2020 as we move into the beginning of this decade into the next decade? Now, part of what I want to talk about is related to video. Because, Joe, when you and I first started talking about this, and it was like, well, what are we going to do? You're very kind, and you said, I helped come up with this solution. Well, the solution is literally you can be in one place. Our guests, our sponsors can be in another place. I can be in Greenville, South Carolina, and literally we're carrying on a program that's, being broadcast all over South Carolina, all over Western North Carolina, Central North Carolina, and for anybody on Facebook that wants to listen, literally anywhere. So the question I ask is, what is in your video wheelhouse? Now, as you listen to that, I want to ask you another question, because some people are saying, what's a video wheelhouse? So I want to answer that question in kind of a weird way. I want you to think for just a moment about this. What I'm asking you is, how are you using video? What types of video have you created? Are you using? Are you putting out, whether it is in social media or other formats, but how are you using this digital media to be able to connect with people? Now, if you think about that for just a moment, there are two primary questions that are going to pop up. One, and this is the best one, is, are you using video to make customer connections? Now, before we go to the next part of this, which for those of you that are watching this on Facebook Live, you're able to see this, but how are we making or using video to make customer connections? If my customer is at home, if my customer is working from home, if my children are learning from home, if I as a parent all of a sudden had to become Mr. Ms. Teacher, I'm having to corral them and make sure with their iPads or their computers that they're using this. How am I able to connect with my customers? And the answer to that question is, if we can't get out or shouldn't get out or are afraid to get out, we got to connect with them electronically. Now, let me just be really candid. This is not a promotional statement. It's just practical, because I'm in a video production studio. And when I talk to my guys who are here, they're, I feel like they're daddy, and they're, it ain't like they're Gen Z or millennial. We going way on down the food chain with these guys. And so if I asked them, I said, okay, guys, then come back and I asked him to look up something. Hey, David, can you find XYZ? You know what he does? He reaches in his pocket, he pulls out his phone, and he starts looking on his phone. And I'm like, say, what? Now, look, you can tell by the color of my hair, I've been on this planet a while. So if I'm going to look something up, yes, I will Google it, but I'll do it on a computer because that's where you look stuff up. But the younger generation, no, they're looking this up here. And I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm pointing out is we are literally walking around within our pockets, the connector to the world, and that's where this is moving, whether we like it or not. So I want to go back to the slide where we were for just a second, because how or are you using video to make customer connections? And if not, why? Now, let's do this for just a minute here. One of the things that you'll find today, a business that is actually, moved through this pandemic pretty nicely, is dog and cat adoptions. Why? Because you got to have a little love from somewhere. You're probably tired of the little kids running around and driving you crazy. You got to work from home. It's not the norm that you've had. You weren't able to get your nails done, hadn't been able to get a haircut. Man, we're looking a little shaggy these days. So the reality of it is, at times we just need some loving, and sometimes it's the dog or the cat. Now, I asked the question, why not? And the answer would be, well, I don't know how. So I want to I want to switch gears, and I'm going to go back to a statement that I made. I'm a vice president in a public company. The name of the company or the subsidiary in the company is American Funeral Financial. We actually fund life insurance policies for families who have lost a loved one. Now, that's not a commercial. It's just the practicality of what it is that we do. And so let's kind of play this out just a little bit. I was involved in the establishment of American Funeral Financial, or AFF as we like to call it. But I was involved in that in 2009. It was a startup company. We were not the first company to do this. Let me be crystal clear. We were not the first company to do this. But in 2009, when the company started, one of the questions that came up was this question of, okay, well, why would someone want to choose you versus the other 10 providers that are in the marketplace, some who have been around since the late 1960s? And I'll never forget sitting at a conference table and said, we've got to find a differentiator. And that differentiator for us was taking this back to, or taking this to, a web-based application. You see, in 2009, if you wanted to use the product, the way you did it was via paper and fax. Fax, okay? Not F-A-C-T-S, but F-A-X, okay? So we said we need to do this web-based. And we became the first provider to do it web-based. And that was our differentiator. And so two things that strike me. One, we recognized we needed to do something different in a market time when that was unheard of. But here's the other thing that I really think is fascinating, and that is, Greenville, South Carolina, and I realize from Statesville to Charlotte in the Lake Norman area, I am intimately familiar with that. Lived in Hickory for a number of years, Morganton, Valdez. So North Carolina's home for me, even though I live in Greenville, South Carolina now. But when we started this in 2009, now it's 2020, okay? So we had 11 years. No one ever approached me that had a video production company in Greenville, South Carolina and said, can we help you use video to grow your business? Now, we're not the only video production company here. So let's just be crystal clear. Just like in 2009, we weren't the only company that actually funded life insurance for funeral homes. But nobody's ever asked me the question. And I find that fascinating because it stands to reason that it's not possible for us to literally go across the nation in all 50 states to individual towns to call on a funeral home, hoping to get the owner to sell our product. Not a possible outcome. So if it's not possible to do that, we've got to figure out how are we going to, in some form or fashion, reach out and talk with those folks. So if no one ever asks us the question about how to use video, it seemed to stand to reason that someone was missing out on an opportunity. Now, here's what we know. We know once we tapped into the power of video, we became the #1 provider in the United States. Now, let me repeat that. In 2009, we went web-based. That was our differentiator. But when we tapped into the power of video, we became the #1 provider of our service in the United States. We blew past our competition. It is not because we offer something different than our competition. The service is exactly the same. The method of reaching the customer was what was different. We had a broader reach to our customer base because of video, and because of that, and because we were web-based, we were always on 24 hours a day, making it easy for the customer in Hawaii or in New York State to be able to use our service at their convenience and the convenience of the families they were serving. So you might ask the question, well, how does that really take place? And here's the thing. Forget for a moment about video. Forget about technology for a moment. In the real world, what motivates people to buy your product or service really comes down to something that's emotional. Now, we can sit back and we can think about what's taking place and how we think about what's happening, but there are 5 buying motives. So let's for a moment talk about what the buying motives are. And I'm going to give you some examples as we go through this. Now, some of these are going to be simplistic, but here's the thing. As a small business owner, it's important to think about your business, who your customers are, and how those customers interact with you. What might motivate them to make a decision to buy your product? So we're going to go through the 5 buying motives. And as we do that, think about your business and think about what emotionally connects. Because sometimes, and look, I'm going to be the first to say this as a guy, guys, we don't always think emotionally. So we look at the practical, like we're going to solve a problem. I think it was John Gray wrote, Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And so Martians, us guys, want to solve problems, and we think that's how everybody functions. But the truth is, the true underlying buying motive for anybody tends to be an emotional experience. So let's talk about the first one, and that first one is pride. Now, I want you to think about pride for a second, and let me play this out. I'm in the Charlotte to Lake Norman area, and I'm driving through a community. Okay, I'm driving through a residential community, and we'll put it somewhere in Lake Norman. Now, I don't know the names of communities, but pick one that comes to mind. So here we are, we're driving through the community, and I come across a house, and I could see this house in my head. In fact, I'm sure a lot of you can see it. It's like pristine. The grass, you know, we're in the springtime now. Grass is green. Gosh, it's so lush and beautiful. And whoever has the house, they mow it in crisscross patterns, kind of like you would see at a baseball stadium before the ball game begins. And gosh, I hope we're able to ultimately get back to seeing ball games where we have crowds of people and so forth, because that does add to the experience. For a while, that may not be reality, but we'll figure out what a new reality will be. But here's the grass. It's all manicured. When you look up the driveway, I mean, every blade of grass is in place, and you can tell someone has edged that thing just perfectly. I mean, it is standing. The bushes are all trimmed nicely. I mean, everything about it. You see no leaves on the gutters. I mean, everything is just pristine. Cars are in the garage. I bet you at that house, they have some fairly expensive automobiles, and I can guarantee you one of them is black, and it never looked like it had left the showroom. I mean, it's always just sparkling. That would be a pride-motivated buyer. That's someone that's like, I'm very proud of where we live. We're not. A pride-motivated buyer is not going to have their grandson's little tyke Fred Flintstone mobile sitting out in the driveway. It's just not going to happen because it's messy. You're not going to have balls sitting everywhere, and you're certainly not going to have places where kids are running around back and forth in the grass and messing up the lay of how it's been manicured. Pride motivated buyer. Now, let's try a profit motivated buyer. I'm going to switch gears with you for just a second. Years ago, gosh, Joe, this has been back in 93, 94, I guess. So it's a long time ago. I had more hair, and it was a whole lot darker back in those days, I'll just say. But I'll not forget, back in 93, 94, I was involved in in-home sales. And so one evening I was in a gentleman's home, he and his wife. And I noticed in driving up to the house, you know, I walk up to the interior. He invites me in. Now, 93, if you had a big honking TV, I mean, those things were massive in size. We're not talking about flat screen TVs like we have today. I mean, we're talking about these big, you know, RGB lights in the back and so, but these are big TVs. And I walked in and he had this monster TV against the wall. The first thing I said was, wow, that's one of the biggest TVs I've ever seen. The guy looked at me and he says, let me tell you something. He said, that's last year's model. I got that puppy at Costco and I got it for $1,000 off the retail price. I got me a deal. And as soon as he said that, it occurred to me, that man is a profit motivated buyer. I love my stepdaughter. She's thrifty. And so she will look for a deal. If I wanted to go buy something, I would find what I want. I'd buy it and generally be pretty satisfied with it. But I'm going to research it on the internet. I'm going to try to find all of the sources that I can find so that ultimately I can buy that product, but I can get it for the lowest price. And when she does, she, quite frankly, is thrilled. I mean, it was a deal. Profit motivated buyers are the people that are always going to remind you just what kind of deal they got. Now, we went from pride, we've gone to profit, but let's play a third, and that's love. Now, I want to give you two examples of love while we're sitting here thinking about this, because one example goes back to my pride house. The pride house, everything's pristine, but at the love house, it looks different. The love house might be what your grandparents' house looked like. Could be your mom and dad's, but might be your grandparents' house. This is the house where it's okay to have the Fred Flintstone mobile outside, because we know that Logan is going to go out and play, and he needs to be able to play and have a good time outside. And, you'll see the front hedge isn't always trimmed. The weeds aren't always out, but you see all kind of little balls in there. There may be the soccer ball, or we went to Walmart and we found the plastic bouncy ball and the one we could play kickball with or dodgeball. Or although I don't know today how many kids are playing dodgeball because that's such a violent sport. Of course, I came along when it was Red Rover, send somebody on over and tried to break somebody's arm, but different generation. But the love house is a different experience. Probably the backyard is fenced. Why? You afraid of something? That's not the deal. The backyard's fenced because you want to have a place where the children can play with, generally keeping their balls and toys within a confined area. So it just doesn't go flying out into the street and unthinkingly a child runs out into the street. Or perhaps love is you have that fenced backyard because you want to be able to let your pets out so that they can play and roam and get exercise and do all of the things that they need to do, but do it safely. But love can also have a different impact. Remember the house that I was telling you about? The guy had the big TV. Well, we sat there for a while. He had big TV and he had a big old nice lounge chair that he was sitting in. And we went to the kitchen table. His wife was there. She was a fairly meek lady. But I noticed in driving up to the house, he had a beautiful bass boat. That was in the carport. It was one of those shiny, speckly fiberglass bass boat. I mean, it was nice. Her car was parked outside of the carport out in the rain. So he had his boat. He had his brand new Ford Explorer, got his big TV, nice reclining chair. But we went to the kitchen. I looked around because I'm an observant person, and I noticed there was no microwave. Well, that's odd. How you heat stuff up? And then I looked around a bit further and I noticed there was no dishwasher. Now, I've washed my share of dishes over time, but I'm kind of accustomed to the finer things of life, like a good dishwasher. And it occurred to me that house was full of love. Not love for his wife, love for himself. He loved his Explorer. He loved his bass fishing boat, took care of that. He loved his big chair and he loved his big TV and he got a deal on everything. If it was about love for his wife, well, that might be a different issue. So if we were going to transact business that night, I needed to appeal to his love for him and his sensibilities to getting a good deal or it being a profit-motivated choice. Those were the emotions. Now, the fourth one is crystal clear today. It's called fear. And goodness gracious, we are in an age of fear. right? We sit here, it's May, it's COVID-19. We've got people who are part of the administration who are quarantining or partially quarantining. There doesn't seem to be a place where this pandemic or disease can't touch. And the weird part about it for most of us is we can't see it and we don't fully understand it. I mean, let's be crystal clear. We can see a lot of younger folk, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but who are like, oh my gosh, I've got to get out. We've got to have fun. And yet we can see that same group of people having fun, and all of a sudden there's a spike in the coronavirus. So it's not just limited to those of us that have gray hair and maybe are a little older and can remember some of the best music in the world from the 60s and 70s. I'm just saying, Little Richard, rest in peace. Now, that said, we live in an age of fear, and right now, part of our message has to deal with how do we deal with fear? And the last one is need. Now, let's think about need for just a second. I do not know what happened. Now, I wish I could say to you that I was, just brilliant at this stuff, but I do not know what happened. But all of a sudden in February, going into early March, and especially when we said, oh my goodness, we might need to work from home, for some reason, the United States population had this burning desire to please don't squeeze the Charmin. Let's take it from the racks of Walmart and Sam's and Costco and wherever, because we clearly don't want to be without our toilet paper, or our Bounty, or a variety of other things that somehow we perceived as need. I have to admit, probably one of the oddest ones for me is the fact that flour is flying off the shelf. I'm like, who bakes? And apparently the answer is, when you're at home, everybody. Now, Chuck doesn't bake, but I do cook. So, I'm just looking for something that's a little bit different. But we look at this whole issue of need. Need, by the way, can happen in odd ways. Like, for example, we are working from home. So you get up in the morning, you take a shower or don't. You go to work. Doesn't make any difference unless you're on a Zoom call with what you have on. And by the way, just to put it crystal clear, for many of us that are on Zoom calls, we need to think about what is the etiquette of being on camera, because some people do stupid things. Like the guy that had the cat that got in the way of the Zoom call and he picked it up and threw it across the room. He lost his job as a result of that. So sometimes we have to think about, we're in an age of disruption. But what does need look like? I'm going to suggest to you, I don't know what it was like in North Carolina, but I can tell you in South Carolina, although we were working from home, you could go to the grocery store and you could go to Lowe's. And I'm telling you, if you want to see a place that was packed, just go to Lowe's or Home Depot and you'd see a parking lot that was full and people that were packed in there. It was like going to the movies. I mean, it was like, okay, look, we got to get out somewhere, and between the grocery store, Walmart, and Lowe's, that's about the only place we can congregate. So maybe we need to go buy us some dirt, some flowers, and do a little beautification around the house, which, by the way, I predict in 2020 in the summer, we're going to have some pretty houses outside and some beautiful flowers, because people hadn't had a chance to do much of anything else. But in their mind, that issue was the issue of need. Now, we've sat here and we've talked for, a good amount of time at this point in time. So what I want to do at this stage is I'm going to stop, and we're going to take a break here in just a minute. But when we take the break, the thing that I want us to do when we come back is talk about the 5 questions my customers are asking. Because you see, up to this point, we have recognized that we know we're in a disruptive stage. We understand that there are 5 emotional reasons people will buy from us. But if we're sitting here saying, let's start our business back up, how are we going to do that? And to do that, we need to know what our customers are asking and how we're going to be effective in helping reconnect us with our customers so that we can begin to understand that dance of a new normal and how we can survive and thrive at the beginning of this new decade. So, Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you for a quick break, and we'll be back to answer those questions in just a moment.
Thank you, Chuck. We appreciate it, buddy. You are listening to WSIC. This is the #1 talk business show in all the villes. I mean, from Statesville all the way to Huntersville. Let me thank Senator Bill. Excuse me. I was going to say Bill Russell.
You're promoting me.
Let me thank Bill Russell, President and CEO of Lake Norman Chamber. Let me also thank U.S. Senator Tom Tillis. And you are listening to Chuck Gallagher, The Distinction Advantage. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back. And we are back. You are listening to WSIC. I am Joe Vagnone, and I am here with Bill Russell, and you are listening to a small business event of the year. This is a 3-day event, a little bit of inspiration, touch of motivation, dab of information, and a whole lot of laughs. Bill, thank you, my friend, for being a part of this.
Absolutely. And Joe, you know how it feels as a business owner or manager to be compromised by somebody hacking into your system, or perhaps you don't have the hardware?
Oh, Bill, I know exactly what that's like, seeing as though you sent me one of those bad things.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, we're responsible for that. You can blame your buddy James Sanders on that.
I know.
But if you don't have the right hardware at your office, you know, exactly what do you do? Well, our partners at WinCourse Technologies has a remote work solutions webinar. It's going to be this coming Tuesday, tomorrow at 3 p.m. You can join those IT experts and register at www.wincourse.com/webinar. That's Tuesday, May the 12th, 3 p.m. WinCourse Technologies. You can register at www.wincourse.com/webinar. Chuck, take it back.
You know, as you were saying that, I have to say this before we kind of officially get started. I really would highly encourage people to sign up for that webinar tomorrow. It is amazing in the world that we live in that anytime there is major disruption, there is major opportunity for fraud. And here's the thing, when you look at the buying motives and people playing on fear, and I hate to say this, but you know, sometimes you have to understand how, you know, bad guys think, fraudsters think. And this is a time, you mark my word, that now over the next 3 years, you're going to see lots of people facing prosecution for doing malicious things. And the easiest way to do that is to do that through cyber attacks. In fact, one of my guys here at the office was telling me about an attempt on his phone and computer and so forth, and it was stupid, but the reality of it is how many people would end up falling for it. So I really would encourage people to sign up for that. Now, when I left, one of the things that I had left with a question of is, what are your customers asking? Remember, I said now you have 5 buying motives, so let me go over some questions that typically you're going to find your customers asking. One is, how can I use your product safely? Now, it doesn't make any difference what your business is. If your product involves physically touching something, shipping something, delivering something, the question is always going to be, how do I do that safely? And with respect to everybody across the board, when you start hearing about children who are experiencing loss of life, not necessarily directly related to how someone like I might respond to coronavirus, but something that's a subsidiary of that, it causes all of us to think carefully about, where is my exposure? Now, another question your customers may ask is, well, is your product available? Let's use a really easy example. Joe, Bill, the reason that we're able to do this tonight from Greenville, South Carolina, up to Statesville, through Charlotte and the whole area is because of equipment that we have available. And when we first started, you know, we were saying, okay, wow, this is cool. We can do Zoom. We can do Facebook Live. You know, there's a variety of platforms. But then the question became, but how do we connect to the platform? Other than me sitting in front of my computer looking at something in my house with it all wonky and the sound being distorted and the lights being cruddy, how do I connect? And it was like, oh my goodness, well, we need a black magic box. And I was like, I have never heard of that before. And we had to start doing some research. Is my product available? So we instantly began looking for the black magic box that makes the magic of what we're doing take place. You know, but here's the problem. So was every church in our geographic area. Because if people can't come to church in ways that we have done for years, how are we going to be able to transmit our services? Well, we want to do that via Zoom. We want to be able to reach our congregation. Yeah, but how are you going to do that? Much like what we're doing here in the studio. So is the product available? That's a fair question. A third question that we might ask is, am I getting a good deal? Now, let me say this, and I know that I risk offending somebody, and that I hope you understand is not my intention. But am I getting a good deal? The world has changed with access to the internet and the computer. Because reality for most of us today is, if I want to buy something, all I have to do is type it in, and anybody that's offering that online tells me, well, here's what my price is. In fact, there are places online that are automatically going to look for the coupon that I might use, or compare what I'm looking at against 5 other vendors, making the product nothing more than a commodity. And I would say 5 years ago, a number of people said, yeah, I kind of like shopping on Amazon. In fact, as a professional speaker, I've, of course, have my books on Amazon.com because that was logical, but I still enjoy going to Barnes & Noble. But with this pandemic that's taken place, think of how many people have become very comfortable shopping online. Even those that didn't want to have become comfortable shopping online and trying to find out, is it a good deal? Now, another question that you might is, well, why should I support your business? Again, here's the problem. The problem is whenever what we have becomes a commodity, anybody can provide it. Now, don't take this the wrong way, but obviously I mentioned this a minute ago, but we needed this black magic box in order to be able to hook multiple cameras up in our studio and have it filter through so that it could go through Zoom to your studio to be broadcast Facebook Live, etc. So we needed the portal through which that could take place. But that portal could be bought in a bunch of places. So why should I support your business? Especially if you're a local business, what is it that your local business brings to the table that I cannot find elsewhere? And let me be honest with you, that's kind of an emotional question. What is it that causes me to want to go to downtown Statesville or to downtown Greenville or the surrounding area or into Charlotte to be able to buy the goods and services that I'm looking for and get the experience that I'm looking for? Another question might be, what do I need to know in order to make a good choice? What is it? You know, I'm interested in doing something. Now, what is that something? Let's play it back for just a second. I'm involved in a church, and the church has not been accustomed to live streaming anything. And let's be honest, the lifeblood of the church is people attending the church, giving their tithes and offerings and so forth, which helps support the church. Well, all of a sudden, if you cannot do that anymore, you have to quickly think about how I'm going to pivot. And it's not like, at least the church that I attend, it's not like it's Joel Osteen's church at Lakewood or T.D. Jakes' church in Dallas, Texas, that have already pivoted to becoming mega churches and to reaching tens of thousands of people. Our little church is a beautiful church, but we haven't pivoted to the idea of live streaming. So we have to think about, what do I need to know in order to do that and to make a good choice? And you see, every one of those questions, as they exist, all deal with emotion. Every one of those questions tie back into, is my motivation pride, profit, love, fear, or need? But those are the emotions that trigger what ultimately is going to take place. So let's use some practical examples for just a second. Let's say you're a tire dealer. Okay? So here you are, you're a tire dealer in Greenville, South Carolina, or in Valdez, North Carolina, or in Statesville, North Carolina. Pick your location. But here you are, you're a tire dealer. Okay, so what am I selling? Well, I'm selling tires. Okay, let's take it a little deeper than that. Beyond the fact that I'm selling tires, why would they buy from you? Well, we're a good tire dealer. We have a lot of tires. Okay, let's take it a little deeper than that, because that's not really getting too far. Well, we've got a lot of staff and they can put your tires on quickly. Okay, well, you're adding a little layer to it. But what really causes me to want to support your location? Why your location versus Sam's? I'm just asking the question from a generic perspective. Is the tire just a commodity, or is there a reason I should buy from you? I want to share with you a commercial that I saw, and it just was priceless. It was probably one of the most beautiful commercials that I've really ever seen for a tire store. And here's how it started. It started off, Dad was pulling his little son in a radio flyer wagon. Here it is, the little radio flyer wagon, the kind that had the little sides to it. And he's pulling his little son on the radio flyer wagon. And next it cut to his son riding his bicycle. It was one of the little bicycles. The training wheels had just come off, and Dad is sitting there, kind of guiding the little child, and the child wobbles a bit, and then all of a sudden the child, you can see that look on his face. It's priceless because he found his balance. The next image is the child coming home, except this time he's a 16-year-old, and he's coming home and he's so proud he's got that North Carolina driver's license. Now, I realize we're looking at different generations, but I can tell you in my generation, when you were 16, you got the license as quick as you could get it because that was freedom. That was, man, the chains were released and I can go do things. And the next one was when the child got his first car. I mean, it's a proud moment when you buy that first automobile. I'll never forget when I was 18 years old, I bought my first car, went to the bank, borrowed the money to be able to do it. Banker looked at me and he said, "Are you going to pay it back?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I know you are because I know your mama and I know all your aunts and uncles. If you don't make a payment, I know who to call." And you can bet you I never missed a payment on that car because that was mine. But the next image in this commercial, here it is. And this guy that bought the car now is a father. And in the back seat of his car are the 2 car seats for his 2 little children. And the tire dealer's comment was, "For the entirety of this family's life, we have always been the people there making sure that they were safe. We've been in business for X number of years protecting your family and will continue to protect them through the next generation." And all they had to do was put the name of that tire dealer distributorship on. And you know what? That was one of the most profound examples of using video that made sense. And you know why it did? Because it tapped into the emotion of why you would do business with them, not the kind of tires or how good the lug nuts were, how many people they had, because that's all male kind of stuff, but it doesn't necessarily endear you to them. Or let's consider a different type. Maybe in this particular case, it's going to be a realtor. If I'm a realtor in today's world, I'm sitting back thinking, ooh, what do? Do I ask my people to come back from work? And if I'm asking them to come back from work, are they going to be safe coming back from work? And how do they feel about going into someone's home to do a showing in someone's home whenever you have all of these exposed surfaces and you're bringing someone that you don't know in? And how comfortable is this going to be? But let me just say this. If I was a realtor, here's what I do. I would ask myself this question. If I were to list a house, what are the top 10 questions my customers ask? Just write them down. You know what they are. What are the top 10 questions my customers ask? I'd create a minute to a minute and a half video answering that question. In fact, if you want to know the truth, I'd create 3 minute to minute and a half videos answering those questions from different perspectives. Now, I can't speak in your neck of the woods, so to speak, Joe, but I can in Greenville, and I can tell you there are thousands of realtors in this marketplace, and everybody wants to list the property. But I can promise you this, the person that has more video out there that is answering the questions that people are Googling has the better chance of getting the listing because they're the ones being found. And maybe we need to change this. What if you're a car dealer? I mean, here you are, you want to sell cars, and goodness sakes, in the car market, this is going to be a tough market. You've got, 400,000 lease units that are going to be coming back into inventory as used cars, and the docks in California are full of new cars. Hertz and Avis have canceled their orders of new cars. It's going to be a challenge. But think about it. If I'm just to make it easy for me. If I had Gallagher Toyota, and I'm just making this up, you know what I would appeal to? Man, you know what? The smell of that new car or slightly used car. You know how it makes you feel whenever you're in something that just makes you feel better because you're styling and profiling. Maybe I need to play to the pride motivation of having something that now is particularly affordable. And on the safety side, you know what I might say? I might say, you know what we're doing at Gallagher Motors? We're making sure before you take that test drive, we've sanitized the inside of that car because we care about your safety. And you know what? When you get back and you've completed that test drive, you know what we're going to do? We're going to re-sanitize that car because we want to make sure that all of our customers are safe. We've been in business for 45 years and we'll be in business for 45 years more because we go out of our way to make sure you are safe. That's been our motto for years. Now, you can play that because you are playing again to the emotion. Or, what if you're a restaurant? I mean, the world we're in today, I think all of us would love to be able to, I want to go back out to the restaurant. I want to sit down. I want to enjoy the meal. In fact, a good friend of mine who absolutely can afford it said, Chuck, you don't know how much money we spent on restaurants. He said, you know what? We found out we're pretty good cooks. He said, so I'm not sure we'll be going out as much. We use the restaurant as entertainment. Now, I know for people who have restaurants, they're like, oh my gosh. See, you have to figure out, how do I pivot? What is it that I can do to create the experience for people that make them feel comfortable coming back to the restaurant and enjoying that experience? Because let's be honest, we don't necessarily go to the restaurant just for the food. We go for the experience that we have with ourselves, our family, and the people we're connected with. Now, as we start to close this out, because I know I'm running out of time, I want to talk about Bob for just a second. Bob's my stepfather. Bob's 91 years old. And I said to Bob the other day, we're on a telephone call, and he's irritated. He has a caregiver that kind of takes care of things during the day. But at night, he was the kind that got in his big lumbering Cadillac, and he'd drive all over Greenville, find him. He had his little hot spots that he'd go to, just, so he could connect. And he said, I'm telling you, I feel like an eagle. My wings have been clipped. And it occurred to me with Bob that Bob lived through the Depression. I said, Bob, you were born in 1929. You were a child during the Depression. And here it is, 2020. And you know what? We have depression-like unemployment. This is strange. You've lived through this twice. And Bob says to me, a little quip in his voice, he says, well, son, he says, now just let me tell you something. He said, in my day, the difference was if we wanted to go to town, all we'd do is saddle up the old donkey and we'd ride to town. And here's what occurred to me. Bob would saddle up the donkey and they'd ride to town in 1930. In 1940, 1 year before World War II, or we got into World War II, you know what? Most everybody was driving a car. The difference a decade will make. In fact, I want you to think about this for those of you that can see this on Facebook Live, as you see the slide on the screen, think about it. We're in 2020. We never anticipated that this decade would start as it did. But can you imagine from 2020 to 2030, if we went from saddling up a mule to everyone driving cars, what is it going to be like in this decade that started off saying you don't have to work in an office, you can work from home, we can use electronics to connect us literally to a small business week that could be larger than any in-person event that could take place? How is that possible? And so as we wrap it up, I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. Number one, you can make an impression for a lifetime. The question I will leave you with is, are you willing to step up your business by effectively using video? Because the reality is where we are today electronically is going to revolutionize over the course of this next decade. With video, with 5G, and with electronic connectivity, we have no idea the revolution that has just taken place. We just got a kick in the seat and are told, you better be prepared. And I will leave you with one last statement, and that is, fortune favors the bold. So we can cry over what was, or we can embrace where we are and look for the opportunity to really expand our business and grow it in ways that we never thought of a year or two ago. And Joe, with that, I know we've got a lot of opportunity to talk with people this evening, so I'm going to hush up, turn it back over to you. I guess we need to go to station identification and a break, and then we get a chance to talk with some of the folks, including Mike and Mike.
You are absolutely correct, Chuck. Chuck Gallagher, thank you, my friend. The distinction of advantage. We're going to have a roundtable discussion in just a minute. We're going to bring Chuck back so he can be part of that roundtable discussion. Bill, you want to say a few words, my friend?
Yeah, Joe, first off, I want to thank U.S. Senator Tom Tillis for his remarks earlier tonight and setting this whole thing off and saluting Small Business Week. I also want to thank WSIC and the staff and Mark, everybody who is helping put this together. We kind of joked a little while ago about the virus that I gave you like 5 years ago, and one would think I learned from that mistake. 2 years ago, serving on a nonprofit board, I was expecting a document from an exec. I got the document. I opened it up. Virus. Well, our partners at Wheelhouse Technologies, they're putting together a remote work solutions webinar. Join their IT experts for a live webinar to learn about the latest in secure remote work solutions. Tuesday, tomorrow, May 12th at 3 p.m. You can register www.wincourse.com/webinar. Don't miss that free seminar.
Bill, thank you so much, my friend. I really do appreciate it. You are listening to WSIC. This is Local Biz Now, special edition, small business event of the year. Little inspiration, touch of motivation, dab of information, and a whole lot of laughs. We're going to be back with Chuck Gallagher and our roundtable discussion with Mike Vagnone and Mike Wiemek, founder and CEO of Wheelhouse Technology. We'll be right back. And we are back. You are listening to Local Biz Now. I am Joe Vagnone. This is Local Biz, and I'm telling you, small business event of the year, little inspiration, touch of motivation, dab of information, and a whole lot of Bill Russell. Bill, thank you, my friend, for being a part of this. We just got done listening to Chuck Gallagher. Chuck has been a phenomenal supporter of our small business program that we've put on. Bill,
Absolutely.
Chuck, thank you, my friend, for continuing to stay with us. We appreciate that, buddy.
Hey, my pleasure. Love it.
Hang on, I got to get your audio. We got him. You there, Chuck?
I am.
Great. Thanks, buddy. We're going to create a roundtable discussion. And let me just tell you, the next people we've got on the show, Bill, they begged me to be a sponsor on the show. I mean, they pleaded with me. They wanted to be a part of this, you understand?
Oh, I don't doubt it.
And after 22 texts of mine to my big brother, he finally decided to be part of the show. So let me start with big brother and managing partner of Windcourse Technology, Mike Vagnone. Mike, thanks for being here, buddy.
Joe, thanks for having me. And it really wasn't that difficult. It was only 2 dire texts. That's all.
Well, they were strategically written, Bill, emails that I'd sent. Mike Wheelhouse is the founder and CEO of Windcourse Technology. Mike, thank you, buddy.
Hey,
I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So before we get started, I want to do this roundtable discussion, talk a little bit. There's people, small business people that are listening, and I want them to hear what they can think about the future looking like, and you guys are the perfect people to help us do that. But first, Vagnone, tell us a little bit, what is Windcourse Technology? What is it that you guys do?
Windcourse Technology specializes in supporting small business technology. For many years, in order for a small business to be able to obtain the technology that the larger enterprise organizations had, it was entirely too expensive. And over the course of the last 15 or 20 years, there have become, technology has grown. And today, small businesses can have the same type of technology that larger enterprise organizations have been utilizing for a long time. And here's the kicker. Not unlike the cost of large flat screens, over the course of time, the technology has become more and more affordable. And in most occasions, if small businesses are not taking advantage of the technology that's out there, in a lot of occasions, it's just because they're not aware of them. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to procure them. I mean, let's face it, a small business guy is running an insurance group. They're running their dental practice. They're running their tire store. They're running, and who has time to learn, right, about what's out there and what are the benefits and what are the things that can be taken advantage of from a technology standpoint.
Right. So
we try to help small businesses be able to do that.
And so, Mike Wheelhouse, here's what's interesting. He said 15, 20 years ago, right? So you're an overnight success. It just took you 20 years to get there, right? So talk a little bit about Wheelhouse. When you started this business years ago, we didn't even know what a cloud was, right? So talk about the start of your business.
Yeah, there really wasn't the concept of cloud back then. Really what we had was what was called ASP, which was, some semblance of trying to create a hosting business for companies, right? And so back then, me personally, I worked for some pretty large enterprises, healthcare, banking, and so on. And I saw that having come from a family business, we dealt with small businesses, we dealt with people every day, and I felt like that there was a need to take the enterprise technologies and make them accessible to businesses. So I took that experience and formed Windcourse and just started developing different technologies, different platforms in order to allow small businesses to take advantage of those things that, like you said, were only available to enterprise.
And so, and Chuck, now you see why I really wanted them on the show, right? Because their business absolutely fits with what the future should look like. Matter of fact, I call these guys the M&M boys, right? So to me, the minute this virus started, the M&M boys were in the perfect position to be able to help small business. And I wanted small business people to be able to hear that. And before we get started on roundtable discussion, Vagnone, can you talk about the webinar that you guys are putting on?
Well, yeah, Joe, essentially it's just kind of basics where we're going through and talking about the things that small businesses can do, the things that are very affordable and areas for them to look based off of their individual businesses. There's a lot of different avenues. We obviously, I think, Joe, you're aware of this. We have a technology partner that we've been partnered with for a while called Citrix. And if you're watching the news, this pandemic, as terrible as it has been, their technology is probably the best in the world for remote access. And so there are a lot of things that are out there and available, even with Fortune 500 companies like that. And we hope to be able to review some of that for the small businesses so that they can glean some level of knowledge about where they might look and what could be a couple of the things that they could use that will help them from a remote working situation that most everybody is finding themselves in now.
So, Bill, you have people like the Windcourse in your chamber, correct?
Absolutely,
so you're seeing
yeah.
the same thing I saw with my brother's business, and that is that it's just the right time for this type of business.
Yeah, we've had a couple of chamber members, particularly IT related, that they're slammed. Absolutely slammed.
So Chuck, let me introduce you to Big Brother, and Big Brother's mastermind, Mike Wheelhouse. So Chuck, and you can see why I wanted to put you guys together. I really felt like your talk fits well within what it is that they're doing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And look, before we really get serious here, I just want to say Mike and Mike. That's like a radio duo. I mean, there's just something about it. So, Joe, when you buy the station, because we know you can just write the check, and then you've got Mike and Mike in the morning and Joe at night. I mean, does it get much better than that? It's just an in-house family, and they can make sure that the radio station is safe and everything from an enterprise perspective is handled seamlessly and flawlessly.
Chuck,
I just saw Joe's to say about that.
Chuck, I just saw Joe's head get just a little bit larger just now. The studio is only so big here.
Well,
I hear you, Bill.
The truth is, Chuck, Mike Vagnone has been on the station several times. He actually was a co-host for the show, getting the brains behind the operation. WSIC on the air. That was the big challenge tonight. So WSIC, I appreciate you being on the show, buddy.
So let me ask you guys a question, and it's let me think about how to frame this question.
Oh boy, here it comes.
Oftentimes when I'm talking with someone, and I'm playing now for a moment in the video world, we have terminology that we use, and we understand what it is. But when we're talking to somebody, they're like deer in the headlights. They're not really sure. So when you guys are talking about enterprise solutions and what large companies do that now small companies can afford, break it down for like Forrest Gump Gallagher and tell me what are certain things that the dental practice needs to know, that the tire store needs to know, that the hardware store might need to know, or the local business needs to be aware of, so that they can kind of connect the dot with what that really is and what it does for them.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think the first thing I think is about technology serving the business. I think it's easy for businesses to get caught up in all the different technologies that are out there. I think one of the most important things that's often missed is really analyzing or trying to spend time on the technology to truly solve a business need. there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of sales, there's a lot of promotion to push all of this technology on businesses. And I think it's really easy for a company to lose focus on what's the real intent of this technology. Well, it was all developed to solve a business problem. And I think that that's probably one of the most important things is try to find technology that maximizes your business and does it in a way that is secure and stable and accessible and performs well. Those should all be kind of ancillary to whatever the technology is. But the first and foremost is it's got to solve a business need first. Otherwise, those other aspects really may be a moot point.
So let me just jump in now this is really elementary, and I'm sorry to go there, but again, I kind of feel like Forrest Gump. I get the idea it needs to solve a need, but there are a lot of small businesses, and I don't mean this disrespectfully because I'm one of them, that don't know what the need is because we haven't experienced it. Let me give you the quick, simple example. I used it in the presentation. Churches that are going online now to live stream didn't realize they had a technology need until the need arose. And then they're scrambling to try to solve it. So if you don't know what the need is, you don't know what to ask for. So what are needs that you routinely find in small business that need to be solved, that you have that capability of solving that they may not be aware of?
There are a ton. Everything that we do, by the way, Chuck, tends to be customized because every business is so unique. But let me answer your question directly. Some companies must have remote access to certain people in their organizations that they can only currently have access to the systems and the applications, the software that they need if they're sitting in front of a desk. The problem is they're on the road 50% of the time. There are some organizations that can't get certain types of business because they have to show a certain level of security that they don't even know how to go about procuring. There are some organizations that need some form of document collaboration. Right now, they may be using, Google or whatever, a number of different scenarios, but they have the need to be able to collaborate with documentation. And they really don't have a really true good means of doing it, right? One person works on it, then they save it, then the next person works on it. There are some organizations, as an example, that are being forced from a regulatory standpoint, and there are all types of changes, and they don't even know how to keep up. There are some organizations that are finding themselves spending more and more and more money on technology, either on the devices, keeping the devices working and operating. There are some organizations that just want to know if they're paying the right amount of money because there's this IT guy that swings by their office every 30 days and he does something on some piece of equipment in the closet, and they don't know. They just know every time he leaves an invoice for $1,500, right? And they don't even know. They need to know that what's the chances of one of these emails that Joe received is there a way to prevent some user from disrupting their business? They need to know what happens when a hurricane comes through and all of the power goes out or the connectivity to the internet goes out. What do I do and how do I keep? And I'm not being sarcastic. I could keep going on, right? And so for Mike and I, we can't possibly come to you, Chuck, and say, oh, boy, do we have a solution for you? The way that would work is to say, Chuck, if you just want to talk about technology, what are you doing? Where do you feel like you're having some issues or problems? Even if you don't feel like you're having issues and problems, right? But you just want to see what's out there. We're going to learn your business, and then we're going to try and take whatever technology is out there and apply it to your situation.
Okay.
And that's what is rather unique, is that
customization.
Okay. Now, one thing is for sure. If we got the Zoom, I got to have a way to cut Big Brother off somehow. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I got to be honest with you. I'm not going to get – somebody got to remind him whose show this is, okay? Will somebody do that? no.
Hey, Joe, he's already taken the Mike and Mike thing on now, so I'm just telling you, he's prepared.
Joe, you finished talking now. Joe, you finished talking now. So
I
now,
cut
guys, let's take it from here, shall we? So now,
Hey, let me cut into this dance for just a second. This is Bill Russell. You're talking to a guy. I'm still trying to figure out a fax machine. Okay, I'm not the technology guy. But here's the thing. There's no doubt now within the Chamber of Commerce, virtual programming is here to stay. It has transformed our association. I think it has transformed business, and I think you're going to see more and more companies embrace this technology because this is simply it's making things more productive. I think it's a transformation. Do you agree?
I do. And here's the thing that I would say. The challenge today is we were thrust into it, and most people are not prepared to do it well. But we're recognizing that when you go virtual, you have unlimited possibilities in terms of what you can create. And so therefore, if we're willing to be creative, we can come up with some things that are probably going to be amazing. To me, this is like when we went from a flip phone to a BlackBerry. We had the phone, it was a phone. The BlackBerry all of a sudden meant we all were working all the time because we could, type things in and we were connected better. None of us would go back to that because we're all sitting around with a smart device in our pocket that can do things that's absolutely amazing. And so, for Mike, for you and Mike, for Mike and Mike, it's going to be an amazing time because you sit back and you look at it, and a lot of small businesses are going to be doing things that they never thought of. A friend of mine was down in the studio, and I'll shut up in a second because I don't want Joe to cut me off. But a friend of mine was down in the studio, and her husband had been a dentist. He sold his practice a year ago. And she was saying how thrilled they were that they sold the practice because of all of the regulation and all of the things they were going to have to account for when they began retreating patients at this point in time, realizing that we're dealing with a pandemic. And I can see there's got to be a technological solution to being able to keep up with that because you're not going to write it down on a piece of paper and put it in a file.
Yeah, Chuck.
So at some point in time, there's a problem, and you guys are going to help solve the problem.
Chuck, I got to cut you off too. A big brother's going to be upset that I only cut him off. You understand that, don't you?
I do.
But we've only got about a minute. But so I'm gonna put you on the spot. You're going to hate this, right? I want you to answer this in about a minute, right? So when I got a virus on my computer, it's because it came from an email of a trusted friend, Bill Russell. Now I no longer trust him. You understand? But how do you stop that? Because it's almost impossible, and aren't I looking to you to do that for me? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because as we open up, as we start to do more video, more online, the security risk is really extreme. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, you need to call WinCourse in advance, Joe.
Amen.
That'd be the first thing, and not after you have the problem.
Right. Yeah, I called them after it happened, Bill, just so you know.
Right.
Well, at least you didn't call your attorney.
Security with technology is really no different than security, personal security or home security. It's tough and it's multi-layered, and there's fortunately a lot of technology that we can implement to put it in place, or to put measures in place that will hopefully automatically take care of the majority of the issues. There's spam filtering, there's endpoint antivirus and monitoring. One of the things that tends to get forgotten a lot of times is end user training. What are some key things to look for in, say, an email that might indicate that it is, a phishing attempt or some sort of malicious type of, email coming across. Does that answer your question,
yes,
Joe?
Yes, it does. Thanks. Let's go to a break, guys. Thank you so much. You are listening to the CEO and founder of WinCourse Technology, Mike Wiemek, and the managing partner, Mike Vagnone, just happens to be Big Brother. And you're also listening to Bill Russell and our keynote speaker, Chuck Gallagher, in a roundtable discussion discussing the distinction advantages of this new world that we're getting ready to live in. Let's take a break, and we'll come back for some final thoughts from everybody. You are listening to WSIC. I am Joe Vagnone, and if it's WSIC, your business matters. We'll be back in a minute. And we are back. We are having a roundtable discussion on the small business event of the year. We're talking with Chuck Gallagher, Mike Vagnone, Mike Wemak, and Bill Russell of Lake Norman Chamber. Bill, take it, my friend.
Yeah, Joe, you know, we started this program and talking about restarting business at the lake. I said I was the happiest guy at the lake. We've got a lot of materials on the Chamber's website at lakenormanchamber.org. We've got a smart restart guide there, and I encourage people to go find out information about it. And they can also see about the program that we have lined up for Tuesday and Wednesday. Chuck, I've got a question of you. You did not let you started off your session and I talking about your.
Are you going to make fun of Chuck?
No, I'm not making fun of Chuck.
Okay.
I'll make fun of you though. But Chuck, you started off talking about your 23 or 24 steps. You didn't let a mistake, a mistake really define your life. It had to be a hell of a gut punch. That next step you had to take, were for hundreds, if not thousands of business owners here at the lake, there's been a gut punch. And nobody planned for it. Nobody looked for it. Nobody expected it. Just 3 months ago, lowest unemployment in the history of this country, stock market all-time high, things were rolling, and then all of a sudden taken out from under us. What do you say to those business owners? What got you to move forward?
Okay, so I'm going to say two things very quickly because I know we're short of time. One, your history does not create your destiny. So you can either choose to be a victim or a victor. And in this case, the issue that we're dealing with COVID-19 and the gut punch that we've taken is, so am I going to cry in my cereal and be a victim of what's taken place, or am I going to choose to be a victor? And victor means I have to look at the world differently. And if I embrace that, I go back to the statement that I made, fortune favors the bold. So sometimes now we have an opportunity to be bold. And as much as of a gut punch as it was, it's also a restart. Mm-hmm. So we're all kind of on equal grounds at this point. So we get a chance to restart and to rethink how we do this. And as part of that, Mike, I want to ask you a question because I'm not going to profess that I'm a technology expert, but I do know that over the past year or two, especially traveling as much as I do, people said, man, you got to be careful when you're in the airports. Of course, I'm not there right now, but in the airports or the Starbucks or whatever, you need to be on VPN. But that seems to be kind of old technology. Is there anything better that keeps us more secure?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, this is an opportunity to change, and you're right. Businesses have been thrust into this situation, and for a lot of businesses, they're having to default back to 30-year-old plus technology, and it's actually been a lot of the business or the conversations that we've been having recently is those people that are realizing they need something that's long term. They need something that performs better and is more secure than what they've been using, right? VPN is, as I said, it's been around for a long time. It's a good technology to use in a pinch, but it doesn't really scale that well. What I mean by that is it requires a lot of support and it doesn't perform very well. For example, you've got users who all are at home today, mostly, and they're accessing all of their corporate applications and data all going across their internet service. Well, you're competing with little Jimmy and what he's gaming and all of the Facebooking and social media that's going on. And all of that stuff has a real impact on technology like VPN because it really does rely on that connectivity. The other thing that businesses should be thinking about is that VPN is good at securing the communication between a computer and the business, wherever the data is sitting. But that endpoint device, that laptop that you're connecting with, Chuck, what if there's a virus on that? What if there's issues with that endpoint? Well, now you've just created a bridge straight into your network from that endpoint. So while VPN's tried and true, it's been around for a long time, it does have a lot of risks with using it. As Mike Vagnone mentioned earlier, we partner with a company called Citrix. And what they do, what Citrix allows us to do is create kind of a virtual terminal in a sense. Think of it as broadcasting back to the user simply screen and keyboard, and it's exchanging that information. And so what you see is your application or another computer or a desktop on the other end, but there's no real bridge, if you will, between the device, the laptop that you're using, and the computer at the other end that's being hosted by Citrix. So it creates a very secure way of communicating, and the performance is generally significantly better than something like VPN.
Okay, WSIC, I'm starting to go to sleep now. We got to stop this now. I'm starting to go to sleep. So,
and let me just tell you, most people were on him 100% and understood him. So don't apply your deficiencies to everyone else.
That's true. That's a true statement.
Now we know why Joe has email issues.
You got me. Let's do. We've only got about a minute and a half left. So, WSIC, why don't you tell everybody about the webinar that you guys are going to have, and take a minute and say any last thoughts, and we'll let Chuck in the show with the last minute.
Well, I'm going to flip that one over to Vagnone because that's actually Vagnone's webinar.
Absolutely. Again, Joe, the webinar is going to be used to share a multitude of things that businesses can do that can help them either work from home better, from a technology standpoint, sometimes from a process standpoint, but at least help to educate all of the things that are out there and all of the mechanisms that are currently out there that people can start to use. Some that don't even cost money.
Gotta go. You got to let it go. Chuck, you got 20 seconds because he took your 30 seconds. What do you got to say, buddy?
All right. So, Bill, you talked about a gut punch, and here's the thing. Tomorrow night's going to be an amazing program with Kathy McAfee. If you've had a gut punch and you're going to lead your organization, you've got to be a fearless leader. She is amazing. It's going to be wonderful, and I look forward to hearing that. And, folks, stay tuned tomorrow night for another great program in this Small Business Week. Joe, back to you.
You're listening to WSIC. If it's WSIC, say it, Bill.
Your business matters.
We will see you tomorrow night.